It's okay with you guys, we'll go ahead and start?
Yeah.
You're the boss.
That's funny. It's not true. Okay, we'll go ahead and start. It's a little after 1 p.m. Welcome to Lincoln City Council pre-council meeting for June the 18th. City Council occasionally schedules these pre-council meetings to receive information on issues or developments affecting city or city programs. This afternoon, I understand we will be hearing from some concerns about the Lincoln Police Department. Mr. Leo Yankton has already stated that his presentation will not mention the lawsuit he's currently engaged in, and that is appropriate. We appreciate your requesting time to meet with us, Mr. Yankton, and as we proceed today, the City Council will be bearing in mind that some of the incidents that you will be addressing may result in litigation involving the city. Of course, as a general policy, it is not proper for City Council members, as officers of the city, to comment on city actions that may result in future litigation. We are here to listen, and we invite you to come forward and provide us some information.
Okay, thank you. Do you mind if I plug my phone in?
No, please.
Okay. I have to reach under here to do it.
And if you would, just introduce yourself and Susan so everyone around the table will know.
My name is Leo Yankton. I am a 42-year-old resident of Lincoln, Nebraska, and a homeowner of a property on 10th and A Street. There has been several issues that has come up with the Lincoln Police Department. Like he's mentioned earlier, one of them is in litigation right now in federal court, but there are several others that are not that I'd like to talk to you about. Susan Alleman, you can introduce yourself.
My name is Susan Alleman. I'm a citizen of Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm here in a supportive role.
One more thing before we start. Originally, we were scheduled for an hour-long session. We had another issue of business come up, so that hour has been shortened to 30 minutes. But I'll let you, so we have just a little bit past 1:30 today.
Okay, I was actually expecting to have other members of the community show up today as well, but they didn't actually make it. Frank Lemire, who is going to be here later on for the DACA hearing for City Council, was planning on coming. Also, there was two women who had also brought forward some incidences with the Lincoln Police Department that they had brought to me, which I had brought and mentioned to the city as well, who were not able to make it. We have statements from them. I'm not sure if that's okay for us to read those. Another thing that we have is audio of the one woman arm being broken. And those are the things that I wanted to talk about. It was basically excessive force and being treated aggressively and with intimidation tactics upon contact with residents and civilians, and primarily the Native American population here. And there's been a pattern of behavior with several police officers, two of them which have been forced to resign. Those officers that were forced to resign were Gregory Cody, and he was forced to resign for an unrelated sexual assault case that I think is still pending, and Aaron Peth, which I'm not sure if that's related to current litigation, but also he had a separate excessive force case that had recently been settled, which may be the result. I'm just speculating on why he was forced to resign, but those two officers were named. And their pattern behavior extends past what happened to my family members to one of the people, Jasmine Pinto, who came forward to me and explained to me that she had been sexually assaulted by Officer Cody when he was called on a wellness check because someone was concerned about her depression and that she was suicidal is what the call reported. What she reported to me, which was that she was groped by him, she said she immediately, once being released from the mental evaluation, reported it to Internal Affairs and that they didn't do anything about it. She wrote a letter, a statement, and if it's okay, we'd like to read that statement.
To whom it may concern, I wish I could be here today to read this in person, so that you could look at my face while I told my story. I wanted to be here, but after discussing it with my therapist, we agreed that it would just put too much stress on my mental health. I am in therapy, receiving new and revolutionary treatment that helps heal the scars that PTSD leave behind. But my wounds are still too deep, still too fresh for me to be able to come and share my story to you personally and still keep my mental health stable. So I am writing you a letter so that even though I am not over this traumatic experience, but at least my story would be heard. I am a 25-year-old mother and college student. I do well in school. I don't have a criminal record, not even so much as a traffic ticket. But like so many thousand Americans do, I do have mental illness. I am diagnosed with major depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And on September 25th, 2017, Officer Greg Cody brutalized me and sexually assaulted me. He was called to my house with another female officer on a welfare check. I was home alone and getting ready for bed when they both barged into my house. Officer Greg Cody was immediately aggressive, and as someone who already has underlying anxiety, he amplified it 100 times. But I tried to communicate with just the female officer as much as possible, and to limit my interactions with Greg Cody if possible, while trying to remain as compliant as possible. We've all seen the news headlines. I never want to make wrong moves in front of a police officer, as it could mean life or death, especially for people who look like me, people of color. I was told I would have to go to the crisis center, and although I didn't want to, I respectfully complied. I just simply asked to put some slippers on and that I'll go. On the way to the police car, my slipper slipped off my foot for a slight moment. I began to sigh and say, "Hold on, my slipper," but couldn't finish because Officer Cody said, "That's it," grabbed me, twisted my arm behind my back, and began roughing me up. I have no history of resisting the police. I wasn't resisting at any point before that. I don't know why he felt the need to react the way he did. During the commotion, I felt him cup my breast, and my immediate reaction was to pull away and to beg him to stop. The female officer intervened and told him to stop. He did, but only after laughing. I will never forget that laugh, and it has haunted me ever since. If that female officer wasn't there to tell him to stop, I am not sure how far he would have gone. After that, I was upset, and I said that under no circumstances would I ride in his car, that I would rather ride in the female officer's car. When I got to the bridge to wait for a bed to open up at the crisis center, I made sure that I got his badge number and business card so that I could report him right away. I remember being in tears, telling them to please get him away from me. I don't want him anywhere near me. He kept smiling a lot as I cried. The very next morning, as soon as I had access to a phone, I called Internal Affairs and gave a report. I told them that he grabbed my breast. I felt nervous and ashamed for just talking about it. I tried to even make excuses for him. It's hard to come to terms with a police officer doing that to you. The man at Internal Affairs said he would get back to me. I ended the call and took a shower. I was so sore I could barely move to clean myself. Every part of my body hurt. I cried as I realized how many bruises were all over my body. I had never had that many bruises in my life. Mind you, I'm only 5'1". I'm not a big woman at all. And my body was covered in what Officer Cody did to me, all 5 feet of me. I felt broken. Internal Affairs never got back to me. I was silenced. Months go by, and I see that a police officer has been accused of sexual assault of mentally ill women, and my stomach dropped. They had not released his name yet, but I knew in my gut that it was Greg Cody. As the information came out and he was arrested and charged, I learned that my gut was right. I was angry. I reported him. How could this have happened to another woman? Another woman like me, with an invisible illness, with mental illness. My anger turned to action. On the day they released his name, I made phone calls, wondering why no one ever followed up with my complaint with Internal Affairs. Then Internal Affairs called me a few days later. The man on the other line told me how sorry he was, and that he must have lost his notes from it. And he did genuinely sound sorry. I could hear the nervousness and remorse in his voice. It made me feel bad for him, even though it was wrong that I didn't receive immediate follow-up. By then, my bruises had faded. I thought that the reason why they didn't follow up was because I didn't matter, or I wasn't believed. I thought maybe it was best to try and just move on. And I tried, but I can't. My nightmares haunt me. My panic attacks cripple my life. When I see a cop car, I feel scared, not safe. A couple days ago, LPD sent me a letter saying they concluded my investigation and that my claims could not be proven nor disproven, but that they were aware that my concerns went unattended to and that the employee got disciplinary action. I threw it down with frustration and hurt. Of course my claims couldn't be proven, not if they didn't follow up with them right away. So Greg Cody got away with what he did to me, but now I've heard that I wasn't the only one who was concerned about him. I am happy that that woman is getting justice. I don't know who she is, but I am proud of her for being strong. I wonder how many women and girls in Lincoln he's victimized, sexually or otherwise. Ones that are too afraid to come forward. I don't blame them. I tried to, and you see how that worked out for me. Life isn't always fair, I get that. Sometimes bad people get away with doing bad things to other people. It's sad, but it's true. What I don't understand is how our tax dollars are still going to be used towards his pension because he retired before he was arrested, even though he was brutalizing women and girls on duty. How is it that the employee who misplaced his notes is getting a harsher punishment from LPD than an officer with repeated cases of police brutality, especially involving young women and girls? This isn't acceptable. This is wrong. To repay him for his corrupt and predatory career. I've already been silenced once. Please don't silence me again. Lincoln, Nebraska is my home. I was born here. My family has been here for generations. I don't feel safe in my own home anymore. I hope my voice can be heard. Sincerely, Jasmine Kimuli Pinto, a survivor.
So Jasmine feels afraid of what's happening right now. The only reason she's even confident enough to send a letter instead of showing up here in person is because Frank Lemire stepped forward and got involved, and Senator Tom Brewer stepped forward and got involved, who are both of Native American nationality. One of the things that I explained to her was when somebody hurts you or somebody bullies you and nobody knows about it, it leaves them open. It leaves you open for more opportunities to be abused, and you have to actually take that risk, and you actually have to put yourself in harm's way again in order to stop that person from not only having the opportunity to abuse you, but to abuse other people. So Gregory Cody is gone now off the force, but what about the internal affairs officer who did not follow up on this or did not follow up on other cases? Why is that acceptable? Why is it acceptable for, even though time had passed, for this to just be excused and the disciplinary action be what, a reprimand, a verbal reprimand? You know, it's not okay for her to be sexually assaulted. And she's afraid because, and this is stuff that I told her, you have to be transparent why you're afraid or what's going on with you, so that when it is publicly shown, it's a lot easier for it to be understood later. Okay, so in our messages, I contact her and I talk with her through Facebook. That's I don't actually go and visit her in person. And I mean, I've talked to her in person, but on a regular basis, I don't have access to her like that. I can't come to her house and just knock on her door and say, hello, hey, how is your day going? So when I was talking to her today, this was the message that she sent me.
It could also put a bigger target on my back by the police than I already have. They have already tried to make my custody court harder on me, as one police officer said I was under the influence when I wasn't, and it effed up my other court case. She just stopped me as I was walking down the street to go get tea and asked me what I was on. And I don't do drugs, never did, and I don't drink anymore. I don't want to be in danger, not while my case is still open.
So because of her mental health issues, she has two daughters and she's a single mother, and so she's fighting for custody of her children. And so she's afraid that pushing against this case about what happened to her will cause her to have retaliation and ultimately her children to be taken from her. So it's actually, it's really frustrating to see that she feels afraid to speak up for herself when put in a situation where she's sexually victimized. And this is the same case with Destiny McKenzie, who's also known as Destiny White Magpie. And she had her elbow broken by a police officer who was called on a disturbance call, and her neighbor who called was actually called the police concerned about her. So the neighbor called the police concerned about Destiny McKenzie. The police came and ultimately broke her elbow and her pinky. And the same officer, Officer John Brando, this is where the pattern of behavior comes in, who was involved in breaking of the elbow, was also involved or ran over Levan Yankton, who's known as LeVay Yankton because of a typo on his birth certificate. Ran him over with the squad car and conveniently didn't have the camera running when he was chasing him down with the squad car. And all these things have been investigated and found that there's no fault there, which makes it, to me, seem like there is a problem within the internal affairs unit and maybe with the higher ranking officers like the chief of police, who I actually worked with the chief of police a few years ago on well, actually it was a little bit over a year ago. There was a woman who was stabbed and we did a fundraiser for her. She was the assistant director of the Indian Center, and there was a home invasion and a stabbing. And when I met the chief of police, he didn't know me, and he gave me time, and he was extremely respectful. And my first impression of him is that he is actually a really good man. And he may have a complicated situation if he has officers that are senior seasoned officers who are used to conducting themselves a certain way, and he can't maybe handle the disciplinary needs of finding out and correcting what's going on. So this woman, they were called on this woman, and in the report, this Officer Hine, who was the actual officer who broke her arm, who Officer John Brando passed her to, says in his report that he gently raised her wrist and her elbow broke. And then later on in his report, he says he gently raised her boyfriend's wrist while cuffed, and he slammed himself on the ground. So like these kind of reports where they sound so unrealistic and so so incomplete, like there's something there. If it doesn't sound right, it's usually not right. And if you're called on a domestic call and you're being really aggressive and you're slamming people on the ground and you're breaking people's elbows, you're not the right person to be out in the field working that position. If you're not going to fire that person, you at least need to take them out of the position where they interact with people and can run them over with cars or break their elbow or accidentally cause them to slam themselves on the ground. Like, who accidentally slams themselves on the ground, you know? And this was for a domestic call. This wasn't a hostage situation in either case. You know, I understand using lethal force or using a vehicle as a deadly weapon in a situation where you're trying to save lives. But if this is a call on average citizens, you should be able to use some restraint. You should have that ability to negotiate when you're pulling somebody's arm behind their back, how high it goes up before you're going to break an elbow or you're going to break bones. And to me, this is really important. And it's hard for me to talk to you right now because I have a current litigation going, and there's a whole nother story there. So there's these patterns that's been happening, even with the Officer Hine. When I looked into his history, he had pushed down an 80-year-old woman and maced her 60-year-old son. You know, this is aggressive behavior. And Destiny White Magpie, of course this is hearsay, but she told me that she knows what the Officer Hine's vehicle looks like and that he's ex-military because he has military stickers on his vehicle, and she could describe his vehicle. But she didn't want to come in here today either because she's afraid for her family. And so it's really frustrating and it's really scary. And I personally feel like we need some outside sources to come in and to start to navigate what's happening, investigate what's happening, and make some changes in order to create a more safer environment for Native Americans or other people of color who might, at first contact, be considered an enemy. That's the only way I could see it, to where you would have to come in aggressively like that, is if you actually, when you first, your first impression of these people are that they're the enemy, especially if they don't have any weapons on them, or if you're called because they're depressed and suicidal. You know, these kind of events, it's easy to dismiss it if you're not involved in it, but this here is a recording of, there was a video of when Destiny was, when her arm was broken. And in the video, you can hear her screaming. And I used to be a bouncer. I used to work at Playmore Ballroom on West O Street, which is a country bar, dance hall. And then I used to work at, oh, I forgot the name of it now. I worked at another one as well. I can't think of the name right now. But so I had to actually restrain people before and march them out of the bars. And you can feel, if you do this more than once, you can feel people's arms, and you can tell when you're at a point where you have to stop or you could hurt somebody, you know? And so if you're wrenching somebody's arm behind their back, regardless of their size, she doesn't have any muscular dystrophy, she doesn't have any degenerative bone disorders, she doesn't have anything wrong with her to make it to where her arm would unnaturally break, unless you pull it with too much force and you cause it to break. So if you're not trained enough or you don't have the insight enough to stop at a certain point, then you should not be handling people on disturbance calls. You should not. If you don't know not to swerve your vehicle into somebody, or if you don't know, even if they didn't swerve into them, however it happened, if you don't know how to operate your vehicle in a way where you're not going to run someone over, you shouldn't be in a vehicle going out to apprehend people, because it becomes a deadly weapon. If it was a man, a citizen, and he hit a police officer with that vehicle, that would be considered a deadly weapon. And then that police officer could use deadly force to stop that person. Okay, so if it's okay for the police officer and it's not okay for the citizen, how does that really work? Because there is no law allowing police officers to be able to use a vehicle to run someone over if they're running. And I've gotten a lot of argument about Levan. Well, Levan should not have ran from the police. That is a given. I know Levan should not have ran from the police. If Levan's involved in domestic assault, which was the case that he's charged with, then he should go to jail. And he should be arrested, and he should be tried in front of a court, and a judge should decide that he goes to jail, what his punishments are. And then that's the legal process, and that's the fair process for everyone involved. But when a police officer runs a man over, then that's taking the law into his own hands. And to me, that's not acceptable. And that's why I'm here, because of these incidences. This here is Destiny when she was arrested. She's screaming, telling him, "You're breaking my arm," right before he breaks it. So for him to say he didn't know and he was gently raising his arm, you know, it's ridiculous for you to be able to say, well, I didn't really know I was doing it. She's screaming in that video, "You're breaking my arm," before it actually gotten broken. And so it's not something that I'm willing to just let go. Nobody's willing to let go, but everybody's afraid. Frank Lemire's not afraid. Tom Brewer's not afraid. I'm not afraid. I am a little afraid. But the people who are involved are very afraid. And they're worried not only is this going to not get any kind of resolution, but also it's going to put a target on all of us afterwards, and that we're going to be treated a lot more harshly, and that we'll end up somehow shot for reaching for our phone, or her kids taken away because somebody reported she's intoxicated, or all these different things that could possibly happen if nothing does come of this, and these officers have no repercussions, and then this all fades away, and we still left existing in Lincoln, Nebraska, and these officers are still left in these positions of authority to where they're actually able to abuse us. And that's why I'm here. And this is what I'm not sure exactly how it can happen, but there needs to be some different checks and balances. And if an officer can't handle people without hurting them, they shouldn't be on the streets. If you don't want to fire them, put them somewhere else. Put them in some kind of position where they're not going to be ripping people's elbows out of socket or running people's legs over. And that's why I'm here today. And I understand that this isn't a normal procedural meeting. And if we need to have some sort of more formal meeting, I would encourage that as well. And we can get more official statements, and I can get people like Senator Brewer, who did want to be here and who did speak with the mayor about this himself personally. Him and Judy Morgan Goshkabash both went to the mayor and spoke with them about what was happening. And he said that there's a multicultural council that meets once a year that he'll have them review it. And I mean, a multicultural council that meets once a year, they're going to review this? That's scary, and that's sad if that's my only recourse for trying to have some kind of accountability happen. And so Senator Brewer had a prior engagement today, but he said that this isn't resolved with that response from the mayor. And Frank Lemire said that this isn't resolved even though he wasn't able to be here today. And I feel the same way. Like, this isn't resolved with just them saying the internal affairs looked into it and we ran out of time because we forgot to look into it. And so it's been concluded. It's been concluded not because we found him not guilty, and it's been concluded not because we found him guilty. It's been concluded because we forgot to investigate it.
Do you have other testimony? Are there questions from members of council?
Yes.
Mr. Yankton, did Destiny McKenzie, did she file a complaint? And is that what you're saying, that complaint has also been concluded?
Yes.
And the findings you said were?
So Destiny was encouraged to take a plea deal, so that she plead no contest to a charge of resisting arrest, and I think the other one was, it's not called interfering with an investigation, but it's along that lines. And she was told that she would get 6 months in jail if she didn't. So she was, they were called and concerned to help her. She ended up having her elbow broken and then being pressured to plead to a charge so that she didn't go to jail. She's trying to appeal that, but at the time she didn't have any help. She didn't come forward until we had a rally in front of the courthouse because Levan Yankton, a.k.a. LeVay, wasn't getting antibiotics. 2 hours after his surgery, after they put the pins in his legs from his bones being crushed in his leg, they took him to county jail and they were giving him generic Tylenol. And after a few days, his leg started to pus. It started to pus up. And so we did this rally and we were able to get him his antibiotics, but then it also brought to light what was going on, and that's when the other two women came forward and spoke to us about what had happened.
I would also just like to add, and on top of that, she is responsible for her own medical bills. That after having her arm broken by the police, now she's got medical bills that she has to pay.
Is there additional testimony? Are there additional questions from the council? We have a couple minutes left before our next presentation.
Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm a two-time felon. I have a long, extensive criminal record. I used to be a bad alcoholic. I went to federal prison, and I was in a 9-month treatment program. And during the time I was in there, I found out about all these business courses and the real estate courses, and I started to research. and I became sober in there in 2010. And so when I got out, I built my credit up and I bought my duplexes that I live in, and I started some businesses. So everything that I've been doing here on forward, my actions have shown a lot of people that I am a productive citizen. But if you look at my criminal history from the past, you can see a extreme change in my lifestyle from 2009. And alcohol was a big part of it, and just, bitterness and resentment and, just having a lot of emotional instability created this. And so I worked on that, and I've changed it. So even though I'm up here and I'm speaking to you on the behalf of myself and others, I know that you could look at my criminal history from the past, and you can maybe try to discredit that, not you personally, but people could. But if you look at what I've been doing since I've been back, you can see that through my actions, not through what I'm saying to you about myself personally, that I am a productive citizen. And I feel like even though I've made so many bad choices when I was younger, I feel like I still deserve dignity. I feel like I still deserve respect, and I give that respect. I don't treat police officers disrespectfully. Even when I have forums on Facebook and we talk about what's been happening, as soon as somebody starts talking derogatory about police officers, I'll delete those posts, because I don't want that. I don't want to go there. What I would like to see is I would like to see more interaction with the police officers. I would like for my community to feel safer and to feel like when they see an officer, that's somebody that they should revere, because that is a dangerous position. I understand that their jobs are not easy. But if you're not able to do your job without hurting someone, you should be put into a different place or fired. Especially if you're doing it maliciously. So I feel like I do have a moral obligation and a moral authority to be here, even though I do have a past. Okay? And I don't want that past to be used against me, and hopefully it won't, because I do have enough of a track record since I've been back to Lincoln to show that I am doing things in a positive way, and I do live my life with a code of ethics that I'm training myself to adhere to unconsciously. I look into what's going on with Ben Franklin's virtues and Aristotle's virtues, and I'm training myself. I'm reparenting myself. And this is something that I'm trying to do for the community too, and I want to connect us, but also I believe they need to be accountable for officers who are too aggressive.
We've run to the end of our time. I appreciate you coming forward, and I thank you for your candor and your willingness to share these incidents with us. And thank you. We'll adjourn this portion of our pre-council and move to another one to talk about. Thank you again for coming.
And so will we have an opportunity to reschedule to talk about what happened?
I will reach out to you later.
Okay.
Hopefully later today. We'll talk about some other type of meeting.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let me do that, Gifford. On behalf of the council, I will contact you.
Thank you, thank you.
That's better, right? Hi. Welcome, Teresa. You're going to give us a briefing on
Granicus.
Okay, that word, yes.
I actually have some good news. Our template should be ready to go by next Monday. So hopefully it will look like the agenda has always looked when you go online.
Back to the one
Back
that we
to the
had.
original
Oh,
version.
that's
Yeah.
nice,
So
yes.
that's good news. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are still working with them on the cover sheet that will eventually replace the fact sheet, but until then, you'll still be receiving the fact sheet.
Are there questions for Teresa about Granicus? Yes, Jane, and then Carl, and then John?
So when I went to, on the city website, I tried to go into the agenda, and I wanted actually to print off the agenda, and this was probably on Saturday or Sunday?
There's a trick to it.
Oh.
When you pull it up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a black box with a white square.
Okay.
With an arrow in it. If you click on that, it will export it into a different program, so you can then actually print it off.
Print it off.
Yeah,
Okay.
where it will actually be paginated correctly and everything, yeah.
Carl?
And will that get changed,
Everybody.
so when you said when they do our agenda, our old agenda formatting?
That will still be the way you have to print it.
Oh, to be able to print it out?
Yeah,
Okay, is it
yeah.
explained somewhere for the general public to?
I don't think it does, yeah.
Okay,
Because in Granicus's world, everything's paperless. So,
You should
You're
never,
supposed to print
you
it.
never print it.
right.
Carl, John, Cindy,
what was I
in
thinking?
that order?
Yeah, I don't know.
That was my exact question.
Ooh, nice.
The black
Good job.
box. Remember the black
Well, that's
box?
good, yeah.
It's in the upper right-hand corner?
In the upper right-hand corner, yeah.
There it is.
If you move your mouse up that way, then it shows up then.
The,
Little box with an arrow pointing up and away.
Yeah.
Who would know?
We found out by
Yeah.
accident.
That's the universal symbol for print, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That arrow.
They didn't divulge that to us, yeah.
John was gonna say something.
did you have something on that? If Larian has something on that, that'd be fine. I was wondering, on our consent agenda, we've learned recently that a lot of times if something's listed, but there's no real report there. Are we going to be correcting that with some of these changes?
With the consent agenda?
Right, so that there's no backup. There might be a sheet saying, see the report, but there's no report.
Oh, I understand. So, that would be one of my questions is, on everything that we have on the consent agenda, like reports of city officers and so forth, do you want those downloaded? We haven't been doing that in the past, but we sure can.
I think if anything, if we're going electronically or with computer things, to have a way to find it, perhaps to the site at that department or what have you, so that we can, if we so desire, we can find it. And I
Sure.
suppose the same would be, I don't know if there'd be any reason why citizens couldn't have that same opportunity.
Yeah, there's nothing that we would have on there that would be of a confidential nature.
Don't want to make, I mean, where you overburden it, but just something so.
Yeah,
there is
like
a
the
rep-
clerk's letter, I don't think we've ever downloaded that, but we sure can. We'll just make it a policy to have everything linked for you, so you can click on it and look at it.
That'd be great.
So, first, I appreciate that, because there have been times it's not that I always want to read what's on there, but where I have to find out who do I call and where's
Right,
that. So-
right.
So I do appreciate being able to just link on it, would be
Sure.
much easier. I had a question for you. I've noticed that we have been getting, like, I guess, dual resolutions, one that approves, one that denies.
Oh, on the liquor?
Right, and so I'm just wanting to find out, is that automatically generated, or are you guys having to work twice as hard?
No, city
Twice as
attorney
much.
prepares both of those.
Okay,
Yeah, and we used to, okay, I'll date myself, at least 15 years ago, I think it was, we did them as one resolution, but then we were having issues with maybe we didn't want the manager approved for whatever reason. So then we split them up to do an approval and denial for both the application and the manager.
okay, I just haven't realized they were on there before we went to the new system?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, so nothing there has changed, you just didn't see
I mean,
it.
that
Yeah.
helps us too, Cindy, because sometimes we put restrictions if we do
Yeah.
approve it or whatever, so at least we've got a basis.
Yeah, I think that actually came up more recently after we
Yeah.
didn't have a link to it online and we realized, okay, we should start linking. And we
Yeah.
went ahead and just did both.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's some way we're supposed to be able to write notes and questions on.
In iLegislate,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think there's maybe going to be a training for us available for iLegislate. Is that possible to get that?
Absolutely,
Well,
yeah. Who would be interested in doing the training?
iLegislate's the desktop app that goes with it,
Correct.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, show of hands, interested in training.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've
I
used,
think it doesn't, I mean, it might be easier for
Train the trainer.
people to have individual or small
Right.
group trainings, so it's
Yeah,
not a public
yeah,
meeting, but I'd still
absolutely.
like
I
to
think
do
the
it.
first time we tried with Carl and Roy, we weren't having any luck at that point, getting it downloaded. Yeah,
Accessing it, yeah.
yeah.
We
So
talked
I'll
about
get
it
those
more than
scheduled
anything.
now and break them down into small groups.
Yeah.
Okay. It takes like 5 minutes, yeah.
Other questions or topics to discuss related to Granicus?
So, Teresa, when did you say we're gonna see the agenda back the way it was
It should be next Monday.
next Monday?
Yep.
All right.
I have a
Yes.
quick thing before we take a break. So everybody knows this A and B Sparta liquor license application is on there. I'm gonna recuse myself. I am not currently invested in that company, but I will be shortly. We just have, there's some details we have to work out. So
That's
I've been a
item-
friend and of Aaron Bonner, who will come testify for 20 years, so it's not appropriate for me to be part of that discussion. Even though you don't see my name on the application, it's because I haven't actually invested money yet.
That's items 4C and 4D on the
Yes.
agenda.
We won't hold it against Mr. Bonner.
Thanks. Try not to, he's a good guy.
I can see it right now.
Hearing nothing else to discuss Granicus, I'd like to tell everybody to take a small break. We do have a director's meeting at 2 PM. That's a little over 15 minutes from now.
I'll need that.